And we will proceed with Senator Alma Francis Heiliger.
Good morning to my colleagues, to the people of the territory. When it comes to this piece of legislation, it is welcome, as we have already had several meetings where we had discussed the necessity of this piece of legislation. I am in support of it, but I just want to take some of my time to speak about agriculture as a whole in our territory. I think we have spent quite a bit of time just running our mouth when it comes to agriculture, and we need to do a much better job in really focusing on making sure that agriculture is to the forefront when it comes to food security and the feeding of the people of this territory. I hope that this agriculture plan, which I was a sponsor of, is going to help move the needle towards that. I recently read an article that the Commissioner of Agriculture has been removed from his position. I hope that whomever the new individual is that the governor is going to put in his stead is going to have one with the fortitude and the foresight and the desire to really work with the farmers of this territory, as well as their colleagues in their initial Department of Agriculture, to make sure that when it comes to our food security, it is a #1 priority. We have to breathe and we have to eat. Let's just call it what it is. And if we as a people don't start realizing the importance of agriculture, we're going to have a major problem. So I'm hoping that with the plan, with the bills that we're putting forward today, we get to those goals. I also want to say, happy International Women's Day. As a woman, I am longing for the day when we don't even need a day. I should never be in a situation where you have to single me out because I was born a specific gender. We have to get to a point where all of our accomplishments are recognized just based on our work, our ethics, and what we bring to the table, and not separated based on our gender. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts today. I appreciate the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Alma Francis Heiliger. Senator Alma Francis. And then after Senator Alma Francis is Senator Franklin Johnson.
Good afternoon to my colleagues, to the testifiers, to the people of the territory. My first part is a statement. I do agree with many of my colleagues in regards to more information being put out to the public as to this piece of legislation. I am severely, to be honest, disappointed that it's a press release. With the type of magnitude that this piece of legislation has had on this community and the miscommunication, I think we as a government should have done a much better job in really pushing, whether it was little 30-second television ads, radio spots, stuff on social media, to really get the information out. A press release is not going to do it. So I'm looking forward to a much better rollout. I don't really specifically agree with having it again under the office of the governor, because if I recall correctly, when it comes to the law, the office of the lieutenant governor is charged with the responsibility of any piece of legislation that is passed. It's supposed to go through his office to make sure that the public, as well as different agencies, do get the necessary information. So maybe that's something we need to tap into, because I don't want to be in a situation where we keep creating things under the office of the governor and his budget keeps inflating every time we put something under there. My question I want to ask quickly has to do with the part with the banking and insurance. I don't smoke, and I didn't listen. If marijuana was sitting in front of me, I couldn't tell you what it was. So I was one of those that went to Denver because I wanted to make sure that as a legislator, being responsible to pass or input, amend, or put forward this legislation, I had all the facts. I don't like sitting here and just doing things, just vote for this. I'm not that type of senator. And one of the things that we learned in Denver is that it's a major issue when it comes to banking and insurance, and it's not something that they could readily regulate. One of the things that was shared with us was that a lot of the dispensaries and retailers, they have banks, like vaults built into their establishments to keep their money because they can't deposit it into, and if this is an industry that has been doing this for years, I don't really think that we as a Virgin Islands could really step in and change these things unless it's done on a national level. So I'm not really trying to put that on you. So I'm not even worried about that at the moment. I think if those that want to get into the industry, we will figure out ways to do it. I know when we were in Denver, they spoke a little bit about some types of credit unions and stuff like that as a way to deal with the financing part of it. But dealing with the federal banks that are regulated, it was a no-no. But I also want to touch a little bit on the street aspect of it. I know all of us want to sit here and we're all excited, or who's excited about bringing cannabis and regulations to the territory. But I also look at it from the standpoint of the individuals that are on the corners, our street pharmaceuticals, our street pharmacists, as you would like to call it. How does OCR intend to handle that from a public education standpoint and potentially bringing some of those types of individuals into the fold to learn more about the industry and potentially cut down on that element? Because my concern has to do with if you have individuals such as this that have been the providers of cannabis for all these years, and then you now bring in legitimate legal entities, there is going to be some type of conflict. Because when you start reducing somebody's funding, there is going to be an issue. So tell me, what do you guys plan to do from an educational standpoint to really curtail that and maybe educate those that are on the streets to deal with this?
So thank you so much for the question. As part of the OCR's programming, under the budget, we requested to have somebody come in for training. That person would specifically be a person that's going out and doing consumer education on the regulations and how individuals may be able to access the industry. A lot of people think that for cannabis, you have to be either the dispensary owner or the grower to be able to fully access it. But this is going to bring so many different aspects of industry to our territory outside of that. So if you have somebody on a corner, they could be participating in the industry by becoming a micro cultivator.
Okay.
That's a permit that has a very low barrier to entry. They could participate in the security industry, just as you mentioned, where they may be assisting in transporting funds from one place to another for safe haven. They could be a cleaning company or a person that provides materials or equipment to the growing facilities. They could be a bud tender where they're working in a dispensary and explaining the different kinds of cannabis that exist and how it could benefit you in whatever ailment that you're seeking assistance on. There are so many different ways that people can get access to this industry, and I think that having that person to be able to train on the regulations that are in place that allow for you to join will be critical to the success of the program.
Well, that was one of my major concerns when we were going back and forth in creating this legislation. In our conversations, I referenced something like a street czar or somebody they can go out and tap into that. So I'm looking forward to seeing those rules and regulations promulgated.
And if I may,
yes,
what the prior legislature did, which was excellent, was you allotted the $250,000 for the training, micro-lending, and then the expungement process as part of that, because we want to make sure that we have their records cleared so that there's no impediment
exactly
to accessing it. And it was designated to the governor's office. And the understanding is that the governor will be appointing out of his office a special advisor to also assist with the same education and public outreach that Director Cardi just spoke of.
Okay. I now want to ask some questions to the Virgin Islands Rastafari Sacramento Cannabis Council. I was listening to your wish list and quite a few of the things that I can see that we potentially can see happening, but there were quite a bit of things that I don't see as possible, to be honest with you. Why do you feel that, and this is where I might need some education because I was a little bit when I hear about sacramental, I'm thinking religion, Rastafarianism. But a lot of the things that you were requesting almost sounded like you were trying to run a business. And I think that's where I was getting confused, because within the legislation, as one of the senators in the meeting, I fought to make sure that that aspect was put in this round, because I wanted to make sure that, you know, the members in our community that do practice Rastafarianism, they have been the ones that have been fighting for this and been at the forefront for so many years, even before the rest of us came along. So I didn't want them ignored. But hearing that testimony, I started to get a little bit confused as to the religious aspect of it versus the business aspect of it. So could you share with me a little bit, whether it's from the organization or from the governor's office or anyone, what are your thoughts on what was represented here to us today?
Well, give thanks, Senator, for the question, too. You're right, Rastafari use cannabis not only as a sacrament, but cannabis is a plant of healing, a plant of renown, that it's a monument. It's a plant that does everything for us. We're looking inclusion and not exclusion. Rastafari has been excluded out of a lot of governmental businesses. We've been excluded, pushed to the back of the bus. And we've been disenfranchised. And looking at $1 trillion business, I feel you're going to leave Rastafari out of it again, that we have a lot to offer. So I'm looking equity. I'm looking to see how we can even bring more to our community. Not just what you all see we're doing right now with music and sports, but offer much more that could uplift and rise up ones and educate ones.
Well, could I wrap up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, if you can wrap up, yeah.
I fully understand what you're saying. I am married to a Rastafarian, so that aspect I'm fully diverse with the educational part of it. But I still want to make sure that we're not confusing the two. I want to make sure that I don't want a situation where we do give you guys the opportunity for sacramental use, but then with all the things that you want, tax exemptions, you went down a lot of list of things that are business oriented. And then all of a sudden, I don't want the floodgates to open that everybody says, hey, I'm going to switch over to being a Rasta, because when you add those things just to one group of people outside of the religious aspect that I was under the assumption you were concerned about, you are now opening a doorway for everyone to now use that loophole to now get all of these things that you are suggesting should go to one group of people. And that's where my concern came in. You understand what I'm saying?
Thank you, Senator Alma Francis Heiliger.
Could I address the senator on her last question and statement? There are many Rastafari in our Virgin Islands, and the VIRSCC acts as the body, a unified body to represent all of the Rastafaris in the Virgin Islands. So I'm not expecting to see all kind of Rastafari come into your office want to say they want exemption and inclusion. They could get into the business differently. But as an entity, a body of Rastafari, I think we should not be left out economically out of it as a body. I think all Rastafari cooperating and working as one under the VRSCC, it gives us an opportunity to bring much more in scholarships, in programs that will benefit the youths them and adults in our community. And when I say exemption, I'm not saying we don't want to be exempting completely out of the business. I'm just trying to say being at a disenfranchised group of ones for so long in the community, we're even asking for a grace period. A grace period being at least maybe 5 years, and then we comply. We're just looking to see how we can be included and what parameters, whether we're not fully exempted, there's a percentage off. We're looking for the government to include us as a body of an entity of organization representing all Rastafaris.
Senator Alma Francis Heilige.
Thank you. I wanted a little bit of clarity and better understanding in regards to RFP and apps and stuff like that that could potentially be used. One of them is supposed to be utilizing to track individuals that are going to be using cannabis, from what I understand. I remember earlier on, there was a major issue in regarding a company called, I think it was Avira, and non-bidding, et cetera. And when you guys put out the RFP, are you going to make sure that situations like that might not occur again in regards to guaranteeing that these entities are legitimate in the Virgin Islands, do have licenses, et cetera? Because one of the reasons why I'm asking is I want to make sure that there's no type of thought process in the community's mind that we're not doing things above board and on track. So tell me your thoughts in regards to that.
Well, the law requires that the RFP process under the government of the Virgin Islands applies. That's also in the proposed rules and regs. It was in the last set of rules and regs for medicinal, and OCR is following that. I don't know. I understand that you're referring to a specific incident. I don't know that that incident actually occurred, but I will say there's enough.
It did.
There's enough controls and balances, both in the legislation that you helped pass as a member of the 34th legislature, and in the rules and regs that governs the operations of the OCR, to make sure that everything follows the government's procurement process.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you for your
Alma
response.
Francis Heilige. In line, Senator Alma Francis Heilige.
Thank you. Good afternoon to my colleagues, to the testifiers, to the people of the territory. I am going to come from an angle of beautification. There's a lot of places in this island that's just dirty. I'm just gonna say what it is. And I'm speaking from a local standpoint that live here, and I can't imagine the thought process of tourists that actually come, because many spots that I go to, I'm disgusted. And I'm trying to understand from the standpoint of tourism, do you partner or you work with Public Works and these other agencies that deal with the upkeep and the overall beautification of the islands to not only guarantee a good experience for our locals, but also for the tourists alike? Tell me how that experience is with the tourism department.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Senator Francis. That's a very important aspect of a tourism experience, and as a local,
Yes.
for us living here, is the beautification of the island. So we do have conversations with our agency and Department of Public Works and Government House through the Administrator's Office, Mr. Avery Lewis. What we find is there's always a response of not enough resources. However, we begin and try to find ways we can help out of our budget for specific areas within the tourism footprint.
I'll give you an example. Anybody could go right now to the back of Windward Passage Hotel. Windward Passage holds sometimes hundreds of people. All their balconies to one side face a street right there. On that street, there is a ditch that right now is so stink, it is so dirty, it is so filthy, that it causes two dual things. The purpose of the drainage is to assist whenever there is rain and flooding occurs because of all the water coming down. Because that drainage is so filled with filth and grime and the runoff is blocked up, what happens to that entire area? You could literally drive a boat on it whenever heavy rains come down. And that's locally. But then can you imagine the tourists looking out from their balconies and that is what they're seeing? And we're saying we're promoting Virgin Islands and tourism. And this is a hotel that's right there, smack dead in the middle of downtown, and we can't figure out how to even keep that little area clean. And I'm saying, do you guys also do exit surveys for like when people are leaving the territory for their experience? Because I am sure some of these types of complaints you do get back. And, it's one thing, My job here at the legislature is to make sure we appropriate funding to the different agencies. But when I hear things like, we don't have enough manpower, some of these jobs are manual jobs where you could just hire people to maintain and clean up these dishes on a regular basis. You have a lot of young men and ladies that don't have work. So when I and my colleagues put the monies where our mouths is and put it in the budget, and we're hearing these excuses every single time somebody comes to the Senate floor, it annoys me. Because at the end of the day, we are having a very, very bad reflection when people leave this territory and the message they're putting back out to the rest of the world. We could sit here and talk about how heavy, how many people are coming in on the planes.
1 minute.
But that's when people come in. We have to stop and think about their experience if they want to come back. And that's where I want to figure out how we try to improve the experience so that, hey, we had a great time in the Virgin Islands. I want to return. So we might have gotten an influx during the pandemic because we were open, but how do we maintain it by keeping our islands clean? One of the things I also hear is customer service. How does tourism partner with the different nonprofits or agencies and businesses to make sure that customer service aspect is on par, so when people leave this territory, they feel great about themselves? And I don't want it to just be about the tourists feeling good about themselves, because if our people don't feel safe, if they don't feel protected, if they don't feel like crime is at a level that they could function in their own society, they're going to be disgruntled customer service people. So we have to look at it from both aspects. So I want to know what you, as the tourism commissioner and your agency, is doing with connecting with other agencies to deal with that aspect as well. Thank you.
You can answer on my time.
Thank you, Senator Francis. Appreciate the comments. I think they're very spot on. Our team could tell you we have many of the same concerns when we traverse all three islands about the need for the islands to be at a certain level of cleanliness, not only for us as citizens, but also for the competitive nature of the business. So a good example is today I have 5 cruise ships. They're going to multiple ports. Of course, they're going to be able to compare each port, which one is clean, which one is safe, which one is not. So it's something that I know our team is taking notes. We will follow up with the particulars on it. We try and we do make calls, particularly around the cleanliness of areas that we believe, ideally we'd like all of it to be clean, but ideally our focus, because of our mandate, is on the more highly trafficked areas. So the Garden, for example, Windward Passage, any around the hotels that do not themselves take care of the areas, because some of the other hotels take care of the areas around them. But it's noted. We definitely will follow up. I appreciate the comments, and I thank you for them, because they are right, particular areas of the island that we have to do better. Thank you. On surveys, and we also have people that do work for us on the surveys that happen at the cruise ship ports and at the airports to get that feedback. So once we get the reports in, we definitely make sure that they share them through the chair, through the Senate.
Alma Francis Heiliger.
Good afternoon again. I wanted to touch a little bit about the recent court case that was held in regards to the trademarking and the usage of the verbiage St. Thomas Carnival and Virgin Islands Carnival. From a public standpoint, I need some resolution as to what the outcome was and where, not only for me, but also for the public to better understand where we are with that. And my second part of the question has to do with marketing and potentially expanding our carnival products, where we reach out more on an international level to bring a different type of tourists into the territory, because we seem to keep dipping into the same pool over and over. So could you expound on those two questions?
Yes, Senator, thank you for the questions. The first one is real short. It's still an active legal situation. Our representative in the case is the Department of Justice, so it's still going on. So there's no, as to my knowledge, there's no final resolution yet, so they're still asking for information,
Okay.
so that's going on. Because it's active, I really don't want to comment too much on it.
Okay.
And then secondly, with international marketing, we are very much aggressively seeking to diversify the traveler that comes to the territory outside of the continental U.S. Festivals provides a nice medium for it. I'll give you an example. Right now,
Time.
For this particular fiscal year, our target is Canada. So we're doing things with the Canadian market. We are very aggressively pushing direct lift from the Toronto area into the USVI. A big portion of it is tied into awareness through the diaspora. I'll give you an example. Anecdotally, one of the reasons why the Uber Soca worked out well for us is the Canadian participants were very excited for the opportunity to come to the USVI out of
Okay.
Uber Soca. And because we know Caribana, we know some things. We've had conversations around Caribana and the USVI because of a profile being raised over the last few years. The Toronto market is after USVI festivals to participate. So we are doing things along those lines. And I think lastly, something that we sometimes overlook is our relationships with many of the biggest soca artists. A credit to our festivals team is spoken about throughout the industry.
Okay.
So the word is around that if you do stuff with the USVI, it's going to be quality. We're going to handle what we're going to do, and we're going to treat you right and professionally. And I think that word is helping us go back to something you touched on in the last speech, which is how do we diversify and get more international, is by doing business the right way.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
We have Senator Alma Francis Heiliger. You're recognized.
Thank you. Good afternoon again to my colleagues, to the people of the territory, central staff, and testifiers alike. My first set of questions in regards to this potential public-private partnership, P3. I know you guys said you have put out a request for proposal and not request for qualification. That is what I recall that was said. And I know in fielding some of the responses, or you're trying to get responses, do you feel based on what we offer here in the territory that it's feasible that we potentially might get the type of businesses that are interested? Because I know from coming to some of the meetings what was said, but especially here on the floor, I'd like it to be said, especially so the public could better understand a little bit more as to these requests for qualifications.
Okay, what we know is that a lot of the operators, over 60 people came to this meeting, came from Canada, Europe, all over, and the U.S. proper. And these are folks who operate in all jurisdictions. We pass through JFK and see how beautiful that new wing is. That new wing of JFK, LaGuardia, all of those things built under a 3P program. So we believe that we have a wide net of people who came with the capacity to do what we believe should be done. If we don't get what we want, we're not going to do it.
Okay.
If we don't believe that it's a fair relationship with it, we wouldn't do it. But we are exploring what is there.
For example, I know the airport in Puerto Rico had a similar a P3 agreement. And we also are in a hurricane zone. I want to know, and I know there was some damage there, because when somebody invests into something, what do you see potentially with us because of our situation being in a hurricane zone for businesses wanting to participate in this and looking to see, even after a hurricane, what their potential return might be?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because the Port Authority, independent of anyone else, will maintain insurance for our property.
Okay.
At the same time, if nobody's going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars and don't insure that as well. So it will be properly insured, wrong. But Senator, as you referenced Puerto Rico, that's interesting because our population know that Puerto Rico went through a similar transaction. Mm-hmm. But what is so different than what Puerto Rico did and we are doing. Puerto Rico was basically bankrupt. So they wasn't doing it so much for all this upgrade that we want. They were doing it in their deal. They walked away, their government walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars for their government, not for the airport. So there's two programs. We are not taking money from this program to give to our government or for any other purpose. So that's a distinct difference of why when Puerto Rico did it and what they did. All money is to modernize our airports, nothing else.
Versus what we're attempting to do.
That's what we are attempting to do.
Excellent. I want to touch a little bit on the discussion. One of the things we hear a lot in the public, and I too have had to go on the airwaves and share with them and explain to them that they were very concerned, and you touched on it earlier, about us giving away the airport to private entities. And I had to keep repeating to them that based on the Virgin Islands Code, only the government of the Virgin Islands can own the airport. It's written into our code. So when you have to, how do you, from a marketing standpoint, because even in our territory, you know you have to break things down to the very minuscule for sometimes everyone to grasp it. How, from a marketing standpoint, do you think you've been faring in getting that message across to the public?
You know, we have to keep doing it. And people like yourselves and so forth, if we know better, that's what's happening here. Let's go to this P3. If we know better, we are to say better. We could oppose something for whatever reasons. But those of us who know the truth and the facts, we must stand up. And I know your time running, but I want to say this, right? We have to stand up. If we call ourselves leaders, that's what we do. We look at people who spreading misinformation. Like some time ago, I went on with Mr. Eugene Farrell, a former employee, and the station sat with him, and I suspect when I got through there, their whole understanding was rather different because we make utterances without any factual basis. So it's our job to continue to try to press this. And I want to give you a good example quickly of what happened. Several years ago, Carlton Dower, the Port Authority, made a judgment that we had dredging equipment here, dredging Waiko, dredging up here. That equipment came from Jacksonville, right? I made a decision with my governing body to keep that equipment at over $23,000 a day or something of this sort. Keep it in the territory because in talking to the to Army Corps, they had assured me that just around the corner, within X month or weeks or so, we would get the permit. I made a decision to keep that here. And what happened? The airwaves light up. All over. People were cussing every day. We stood our ground, but this is important. We stood our grounds and tell them that we are making a decision based on information we have. We told the public what we were doing, and guess what? We paid, it cost $500,000 or more to allow that equipment to go to Jacksonville and come back to the territory. We said we're going to get this permit in time. We paid, I think it was under $300,000 and kept the equipment here. That's what happened, and guess what? We didn't hear anything. You know what we do? Because people who knew better and was on these radio stations, it's not because the radio to me what they're saying is factual. When we spread this information, if we know better, but by contrast, you know what ended up happening at the same time? The Port Authority did a job. Way under the $500,000 to leave it go. You know what WAPA did at that time? They needed to dredge for the same fuel budgets what coming in there now. But you know what they did? They allowed the equipment to go back to Jacksonville. When they went to bring it back to the territory, it cost them $700,000. Who paid for it? We, the ratepayers. But you know why? Because they were now gun shy and wouldn't lead and say, you know what? The 5 people who are calling and talking could talk, but I'm going to stand up to it.
Well,
that's where...
Senator,
I thank you. Sorry.
Alma Francis Heidegger.
Yes.
I gave you a lot of leniency.
Yes.
So we're going to move right along, okay? We're going to have a rapid round.
But the cost was probably prohibitive. And at the time, the people back then, I guess the cost was probably prohibitive. And at the time, the people back then, you know, vision is a funny thing. Back then, the same people rebel that they shouldn't do this here. But that was the airline, and if the gentleman that had owned the airline was already in this territory. But I don't see us. They had an airline that was a local airline, not the government, at called Aero Virgin Island. There was a group of investors that got together and they ran Aero Virgin Islands. It wasn't the government.
Okay.
I would think the government needs to stay out. But that's just my opinion on the airline thing.
I know we're also talking about this P3 potential partnership expansion, and you also touched with you doing deals and individuals building properties across the street. Explain to me a little bit what is happening with this situation with Bournefield, these residents, and the potential that we've heard about wanting to expand the airport into that direction.
Well, we continue to expand the properties. If you'll go down there, just 2 days ago, we took down about 2 more units. And we're not evicting anybody, at least at this point, what the board has authorized. When a unit becomes vacant for whatever reason, we take it down. So
Have you guys participated in, for example, technically you're the landlords. One of the things that I've heard as complaints is they're not getting service. Like if something happens, things don't get repaired. So it's almost like a forced eviction when things dilapidate to the point that they just have to get out. Is that accurate, or how is that working?
Well, it depends on the extent of the... Let me tell you something. Carlton Down known to be frank, regardless of how people might see it or view it. But we also have to tell our people, you have people living down in Bournefield that should not be living there, based on strictly the economic ability. You had people in Bournefield left there, lease out that same property to other people and so forth. That's abuse. So if we believe that the port should sit back and allow this kind of thing because I know you're good, it don't get us anywhere. And we have to stand up
Well,
and
that's something you guys could legally deal with.
So
but
that's why
I'm talking about derelict properties. And have you guys done anything? Like, for example, somebody is legally there. They're paying their rent. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Do you guys, if something goes wrong, deal with maintenance? Have you avoided that?
It depends on the level of maintenance. We have made it clear to everyone there that they should relocate. On time. So let's start there. We told them they should relocate. But however, the Port Authority is not going to spend $200,000 or $300,000 doing any, those places are really in bad and poor condition. Not today. For many years. They had inspections done telling you that. So if people remain there, the Port Authority is not going to spend no $100,000 or $1,000 repairing anything. If there's something minor to be done, sure, we'll do that. But we're not going to spend $100,000 or $1,000 to make somebody comfortable in that setting. People need to move on.
Sir?
I gave you more than enough time. We have to keep it moving. We'll be here all night. We're moving right along.